Hello guys, hopefully you're all doing well. A few months ago I had made a video about the Silverback release aid and 6 mistakes that I see beginners with this release aid, and I guess that video has got a little bit of questions, a few comments back, and one of the most popular comments I get is I've been using the Silverback for a little while and they struggle getting it to fire. I'm going to assume that question probably comes from when they're actually, using it, shooting at targets, not so much practicing up close or something like that. So in this video, I want to go over 5 reasons why your Silverback won't fire. So the first reason might just be a pure malfunction. I think this reason is highly unlikely, but it's the most common reason that I think beginners go to when they start using it. So let's say they've practiced up close, have no problems, coming off the safety, working it to fire, working it to fire, working it to fire. Then they start actually shooting it, for a little while in the yard with targets and extending the ranges and stuff. And then they start realizing, wow, it's so hard to fire sometimes that they begin to shake, they begin to struggle to get it to go. And the common thing is to particularly blame the release aid itself. Now that may be true, and you definitely probably want to go through it. I think there are some videos online that maybe Dudley has put out on how to, keep it greased up or lube it up and really care for the release. That's a big deal if you live in a place like me in Hawaii where everything is high humidity, and if you don't take care of it, everything rusts around here. So when I first had got my Silverback, yes, when I took it apart to clean it, I don't advise folks take it apart. If you don't know how to do it, go get somebody that knows how. But when I took mine apart, there was actually some tooling chips and stuff inside of it. So when I took all of those things out, greased it up, put it back together, it did work a lot better. So I'm not saying there's not a possibility that it is a malfunction. What I am saying is that it's probably unlikely. It's probably more to do with you. But that's the first reason. It could be a malfunction. Definitely check that out. But if you're fine up close and it's going off just fine up close, and then over time you practicing in the yard, extending the range, and you can't get it to go, probably not a malfunction. Okay, the second reason I got here is it could be set too heavy or set too light. What do I mean by that? Set too heavy is kind of the obvious one. You're pulling away, pulling away, pulling away, even when you're starting out up close, and it just doesn't fire. Like, it takes way too much energy for you to get through it. However, though, when you're starting, I would suggest that you do have to work a little bit at it. That's how you kind of dull your mind from the anticipation or from the panic, is that you're working through it. You're consciously having to work through it a little longer than typical. That's the magic of this thing. But yeah, if it is too heavy and you just can't get through it, then yeah, you're gonna want to take some few turns off and back that out, make it a little lighter. Now on the flip side, I said maybe it's too light. Now that's probably counterintuitive, doesn't make sense. If it's light, why doesn't it just fire all the time? But it could be a situation where maybe you had started out pretty proficient, like you're okay, and you begin to back it off over time because you're kind of rushing the process. And what I mean by rushing the process, I don't mean by rushing the shot or anything. I'm rushing the overall progression of your shooting in time. So what I mean by that is you got these gains real quick, and then you want to see how good you can get really fast. And I would caution people to really take a look at that. Once you start developing bad habits, they become very difficult to break. You spend all that energy trying to develop a good habit with the new release and all of that, and then now you try to make some quick gains, lighten it up real quick, make it easy on yourself, and in a few exercising of those bad habits that you may have with anticipation or timing the shot or something like that, you may literally just regress all the way back and have to lose all your gains and have to start all over again. So be careful about that. And what I mean by that is, yeah, you've been making it light a little bit, maybe a little too early, and you've gotten used to timing how light that is, or you've gotten used to being able to kind of finesse the release, just go real soft and make it fire, real soft and make it fire. And what happens is, eventually for a lot of people, is when they go softer and softer, it's always getting too heavy until they keep making it lighter and lighter and lighter. And then it's so light that one of two things happens. They begin to time it very well and focus on aiming too much, more than their execution, or maybe they actually get too timid about it. Now it's really light and they're afraid to bear into it, put the pin on the dot and bear into it and execute, bear into it and execute. They can't do that anymore because they made it so light. So basically you kind of worked your way back into the bad habit of, you know, aiming a lot or really not focusing on execution or focusing less on execution as you went down the line, and now it becomes harder. So that's a little bit counterintuitive one, but definitely one to cover. Okay, now the third one is form breakdown. Dudley covers this pretty extensively in his video, so you can watch his. He's the master at this, not me. I'm just a backyard expert at best, and maybe not even that. But anyway, I'm gonna try to demonstrate that with this bow, my hunting bow. I have yet to take a shot with this and this bow in months. I can't even remember. Maybe even not this year. So I'm gonna take a shot with it, and I'm gonna try to explain the form breakdown of the front shoulder. Basically, what it is get in the frame here, but you're all set up, and as you begin to pull, in your effort to either want to aim steadier or to maybe you're just getting weak on your form, this front shoulder can creep up like this. And if you think about that front shoulder creeping up as you're trying to pull, essentially you're giving and you're taking at the same time, and it can make it difficult to fire. So I'll try to do a clean one first, which is, you draw back, you kind of check in, find your weight, anchor up, right, come off the safety and pull. Versus this one's going to be tough because I'm going to have to try to practice a bad habit, but I try to raise that front shoulder as I pull, and you'll see maybe I'll start shaking, maybe I'll start struggling. We'll see. That was kind of light, but let's try it here. Okay, checked in. Okay, on target, and now I'm going to raise my front shoulder and try to pull. I don't know if you can see that I started shaking just a little bit. It was still kind of easy to get through. It's hard to practice a bad habit. I'll do it again. And generally, I think you guys can film yourself maybe with your cell phone or something when you're doing it right up close, and you can kind of see how your front shoulder is probably down and forward, relaxed, and not scrunched up like this. A lot of people tend to aim well when they do this. They both hold steady. But as they begin to add pressure on the back to execute the release, it begins to push back into them. So they're, giving and taking at the same time. So it's, if you keep doing that, you got nothing left, and then you start shaking, and it'd be difficult to fire. So I'll do it one more time here. Back, set up. So I'm set up how I like to set up, but I'm gonna kind of scrunch my front shoulder here and pull. That was kind of too easy. It's very difficult for me to practice it, but you get the idea. And that's a very common one. It's hard to notice because generally what's happening, I think, is the beginner, when they scrunch their shoulder, they might be holding the bow steadier at the beginning of their shot, so they think they're doing it right. And then they begin to pull, and then they're struggling through it, and then they wonder, well, what the heck? I was just fine up close, but as soon as I start shooting further, mentally some people want to aim a little more than execute and pull on the back half. So they can struggle through that, which is going to lead me to the I think we're on the fourth reason why. Okay, the fourth reason why is a mental reason. I think everybody can talk about, mental this, mental that, shooting is 90% mental, or all this and that. But, if you happen to be kind of a beginner or a novice watching this, or maybe even if you're advanced at it, the mental side of things is a very difficult one to pin down, because you can't watch what's going on in your head, or what are you thinking, or whatever. So it's kind of something that you kind of have to recognize yourself. And I'm going to try to go over maybe one topic that I think is, it might be a little bit in the weeds. Try to bear with me here, but hopefully it can make sense to some of you. So a lot of psychologists have studied this, and basically they figured out that the conscious mind, what you're actively thinking of when you're doing something, can literally only think of one thing at a time. Now, there's people that say, I can multitask, I can watch TV and type an essay at the same time and pay attention to both content. I don't think so. Psychologists have studied this. They said now the mind may be able to switch back and forth very quickly, but in any one instance, the conscious mind can only do one thing at a time. And there's another part of the mind, the conscious and the subconscious. So the conscious are the ones you're actively thinking of. Like I'm actively thinking of what I'm going to say next, what the next topic is. That's my active thought here. But the subconscious thought is like literally you see my hand moving around? You see how when I'm talking, I'm moving and I'm dynamic? I'm not thinking about what I'm going to move. It's just kind of happening all by itself. That's kind of maybe a good example of what the subconscious mind is. That's the things that you're doing, but you're not thinking about. So as I'm talking, I didn't think about breathing just now. I didn't think about my heart having to beat. All of these subconscious things, they just kind of run as like a auto program while you run your conscious program in front of you, what you're actively thinking of. Now just imagine now, say everything was in the conscious mind and you had to think of every bodily function all the time. So I wouldn't be able to speak the same time I have to think about making this heart beat, the same time I have to think about making my lungs breathe. I'd probably end up dead doing an activity like this. I would have to focus on survival instead of talking here. So where am I going with this? Now, just remember there's conscious, subconscious, the active thought, and then the things you don't think about that your body can do. Now, when you're using a silverback, when you're up close and you're just starting out, if you're doing it the way Dudley teaches, or some other people say start up close with a blind bail or a blank bail, no sight, no target. What you're only focusing on is the feel and working the release, right? Pulling through it, pulling through it, pulling through it till you get good at that. And basically all it is doing is you're limiting your conscious mind to just focusing on pulling. Okay, maybe I feel I set up, and then when it's ready to go, pull, 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 pull. Not thinking about aiming, not thinking about the target because it's really big and close. So you're really teaching the conscious mind to focus on the one thing and let everything else go. Now, when people say they start struggling getting through the release, it's probably going to be because when they start shooting further, go in their yard, put the target 20 yards, 30 yards, whatever, maybe even 100 yards for the guys can shoot good, or maybe the guys trying to run a little bit before they can walk. In those instances, now you introduce two things, right? You have to be able to hold the bow steady enough for the distance and the size of the target you're trying to shoot, and also execute, pull, 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 and execute the release. Therein, for beginners generally, therein lies the problem. They're wanting to focus on holding the bow steady consciously, right? Maybe. But as you're doing that, you can't focus on pulling this. So somewhere along your progression in this release and maybe in your archery life, you're going to have to learn how to put things into the subconscious, things that you don't have to think about there. And this is probably different for everybody. For me, I can tell you that when I'm in my shooting, I just kind of put the pin around the target, and then when it's time to go, I actually do look at the target and go. But go for me, I just know that as I pull more and increase pressure in the bow, that's going to steady the pin, because that's what I want to do, is steady the pin, and boom, it's going to fire on its own. That's the way it works when it works all right. Does it always work that way? No. If it did, I'd probably be a pro. So I'm not. But that's the way I make it work. So I'm focusing on the target, and then when I say go, I want to steady, and the pressure builds, boom, and it fires. That's how I do it. Now some other people, it may be, kind of get it around there, and then okay, pull, 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 pull. They're focusing on the back half. But as they're focusing on the back half, the front half maybe can subconsciously just watch the pin, and you're focusing back here getting it done. All I know is as you step out further, and if you do this too quickly, you can't naturally decide which one you like better. If you do it too fast, you're going to flood your mind with having to do two things at once: aim and pull, aim and execute at the same time. So you'll be aim, execute, aim, execute, aim, execute. Then you have this like start, stopping. And as you start, stop, your body gets tired, shoulder may begin to creep up as you start and stop. And all of those things begin to come together to a point where you start shaking it won't go off because you can't build sufficient pressure to fire the release. So hopefully that makes some sense. That was a very complex topic. You can probably go into it a little bit differently, but generally it's what I just explained there was a mental thing of what you're thinking of. You're not focusing on the right thing, or you're trying to focus on too many things at once, and that also causing you to physically break down and not be able to build pressure on the release to fire it. Okay, now the fifth one, which is a little less common among more advanced shooters, and I find this is a little more common in advanced shooters, and I find it less in kind of the novice or beginner shooters, is string hand inconsistency. So how you hold the release can change how much pressure it takes to fire. I'm going to try to explain this up close here instead of shooting it, but basically, if I had to try to show you up close here. Now, you guys, when you first draw back, you're on the safety, right? You draw back, you get set up, and your hand is, you know, there's some kind of pressure in your hand, whatever it is. You could hold it fairly firm, you could hold it really soft, you know, you could hold it all kinds of ways, right? And if you hold it fairly firm, like, you know, you got a good J hook on it, you know, it's in that row of knuckles, and you know, you draw back, you find your anchor, and you're fairly firm. As you begin to pull, there's not a whole lot of give in your hand, because you've got some tension in it, some firmness in it, you know. However, what I find is, you know, beginner shooters generally don't suffer from this. It's probably more the advanced ones that get comfortable with the release. But basically, the beginner shooters, they're afraid of letting the release go. Sometimes, as long as they're not suffering from crazy target panic, they let it go. But they're holding on to it, and they draw back. And sometimes when they're holding on to it, they don't have the problem of wanting to relax the hand. They hold on to it and they pull. Sometimes, and in the first video of the 6 mistakes, I explained some beginners who actually fire it with their hand instead of pulling with their elbow. So basically, going over that real quick, when you're firing with your hand, which, you know, it can work for some people, but it's not particularly the way I shoot it. But you know, if it works for you, it works for you. But the hand ways, you'll see basically the hand will be tight, and then they'll squeeze their hand to fire the release, and there's no pull through, there's no follow through. It's just kind of dead right here. Versus if I were to think about my rear elbow, this elbow back here, it's just continually building pressure rearward, it'll break away. Now when you fire with your hand, tense hand or something like that, you know, like this, you can torque the release, you can do kinds of things on the back of the bow, which can maybe cause some inconsistencies downrange. So that's covering that real quick. But back to what I was talking about, the inconsistent string hand. So if you're a person that gets really comfortable with the release sometimes, in an effort to want to hold steadier or kind of get relaxed, some people may relax this hand, make it soft, right? And a soft hand is probably good for, you know, if you can consistently shoot your thumb button or your hinge release, or even an index finger trigger that way. That may work out for you pretty well. But with this, since it needs tension, you know, if you soften your hand too much, and then as you build pressure, if you soften your hand some more, you know, it's like as you're trying to build pressure, you're also giving away with your hand. You know, I'm exaggerating that motion here. So for some people that struggle through it, they may be relaxing as they're trying to build pressure, but they're actually giving as they're taking until they run out of room to take, and then the shakes start, you know, and then it won't fire. So that may be an example of, you know, that inconsistent string hand, messing it up and giving them the perception that they need to have more pressure to fire the release than they are typically used to. Okay guys, so those are the 5 reasons why I think your silverback won't fire. Maybe some of the problems or issues you might have, the most common ones that I have seen. If you got any deeper questions, you guys can put them in the comments below. Hopefully that was useful a little bit. And you know, I can't leave this video without at least making one more comment, and that's, you know, thank you guys for watching and following along and all of that. But you know, there's something all videos and all beginners, you know, definitely I feel I should say, other folks say it too, but definitely look at your information, look at where you're getting your information from and who you're getting it from, because sometimes, you know, you can flood yourself with too much stuff and really like regress backwards by, you know, having a poor source, or maybe somebody who you know, says a lot of things but they can't do what they actually preach. So let's be real here. You got to find some credible information that can actually take you somewhere, hopefully. I can't guarantee my stuff is credible, but you know, hey, I compete a little bit where I can. Of course, I'm in Hawaii, so I got to fly to the mainland to go to compete, and that's a challenge. But generally speaking, you know, I'm pretty confident in my abilities and what it is, and you know, hopefully my take or the way I presented the information, you know, a different way than others may ring a bell with you. So, but definitely, if you're a novice or beginner, look at your sources. Really, how do I say it? Protect your mind, I guess. Look out for yourself, because you can put yourself into a spin of information and really screw yourself up. So beware of that. This is the information age. This is YouTube, social media, whatever it is. So just be aware of that. And with that, thank you guys very much for watching the video. Hopefully it was useful, and catch you guys in the next one. That's the Silverback. Aloha guys, take care.